Okay, I will call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging we are in Treaty 1 territory and a traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing today's panel. With me is Maurice Theriault to my immediate left, and to my far left is Brent McIntyre. The assessor today is Tricia Caldwell, and the recording secretary is Michelle Neepin. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and will limit discussion to those matters. The statements of the applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing. I lost my spot. And issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the applications of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matter to be addressed with each applicant following a swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. This session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. We'll receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. So I believe we have to swear them in again. Wow. Anyhow, yeah, they might have decided not to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Do you swear in our firm? Can you state your full name, Tricia Caldwell? Do you affirm that the evidence about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Can you state your full name, please? Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Okay, so we have 1681 Church Avenue.
This is roll number 1406-446-0300, 1681 Church Avenue. For roll year 2020, we have an assessed value of $2,669,000. If you could please turn to page 4. That's incorrect. No, don't turn to page 4. Maybe turn to page 7. On pages 7 and 8, you'll find a map of the subject property. It's in the Inkster Industrial Park. On page 8, you'll see an aerial view of the property. There's 2 buildings, both one-story flex warehouse buildings of masonry construction. Property was built in 1974 with wall heights of 16 feet. It's Zone 2, Zone M2 General Manufacturing. The land area is 99,864 square feet. Plan area of 39,375 square feet. With a land to plan area of 2.54. You'll see on page 2 that they complied with submitting income and expense information for 16 and 17. And there was a sale in 2008 for $1,800,000. If you could please go to page 5. where you'll see our cap rate chart. All of our industrial cap rates range from a low of 5.5 to 9.8%, with 60% of our cap rates falling between 6.34 and 7.80%. If we flip back to page 4, we'll go through the income workout. We have a total leasable area of 39,070 square feet, broken down into several business premises. And we have an overall rent rate of $5.19. We have a vacancy loss, market vacancy loss of 3.5%, 2% on recovered expenses, a shortfall rate of $3.75, giving an NOI of $186,813. We've applied a table cap rate of 7%, bringing our estimated value to $2,669,000. And if you flip back one more page to page 3, I have some rental comparables. All comparables are in the subject neighborhood, similar wall heights and vintage, with rents from $4.10 to $6.50. And so our table rate falls right in the middle of that. I believe that I submitted an extra addenda. If you could turn to page 2 in that addenda, just wondering if it's the little.
It's at the, did you not get one? You wanna look up this?
I don't know if I have.
That's the one.
And the last one, the whole package.
It's in your package.
I wasn't given one.
I submitted.
And I didn't end up with any extras, so.
No.
Hey, well, you can have mine. I know what it says.
Well, no, I'm just concerned about, what is it? It's the, yeah, well, I certainly don't mind extending you the courtesy of.
Well, we did have
Yes,
2 weeks to submit, again, resubmit.
No, it said right in the letter, you couldn't resubmit.
Oh, I was told I could resubmit.
Yeah, no, I got,
No, it was,
No?
anyways, in the letter, it did say evidence exchange had already occurred for the property.
Oh, okay.
But that was submitted at the same time as your brief, no?
No, it wasn't. No,
Ah.
it wasn't.
so it was
Okay.
after.
So I was
Yeah.
instructed by management to submit anything, because this was back in August
Yeah.
originally, and we've since attached an addenda to the back of our brief, so normally it would be in the brief at this time. So, we don't have to,
Well,
We might have to-
I'm just gonna make a suggestion here that, what was that old saying with geese? I had some stuff too I was gonna hand out, so if you have no objections, and you've seen it, it's just like your stuff, so. if
It's
you want-
on the 5%?
Yeah, and I think the board's seen it all, so.
Yeah, if you're willing to
sure.
have that, that's
Yeah,
fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Because it's an important issue, so we may as well get a full.
Sorry, before we continue on, I should have asked this or a question earlier. It's understood, all parties, that 1450 Mountain is being moved?
I was waiting for direction from,
Yeah.
information from you guys and direction from the chair, so.
A response I had was that it was being moved, and that we're not disagreeing.
That's, yeah.
Yeah,
If
there's
we-
no dispute in adjourning it off the hearing today.
Okay.
In its entirety, or?
Well, two of them are now null and void. Probably number 2, and likely, well, it must be a typo there. Oh, okay, number 2 is voided.
19-501.
Yeah, because it doesn't exist anymore, that rule.
Okay.
And number 3, it was changed. There's a value change on it, that's the supplemental, not the original.
Well, the one you're looking at on the docket right now is the supplemental. The original base assessment
Right.
was removed from the docket.
Right, but that was only entered yesterday.
Correct.
And so numbers 3 to 6 were entered yesterday.
Correct.
And I guess we have a consensus, we prefer to have them moved.
Yeah, I need time.
Okay. Just so the board can relax and know we're only dealing with one property.
Okay, so all right.
Okay. Do you want an explanation?
Well, that would be kind of good. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know if nothing hinges on that.
I don't actually have the schedule there, so I can't refer to file numbers.
Oh, you don't, I put a docket on your desk?
No,
No?
no, there was nothing here when I came in, but,
Well, here. Although it doesn't have the dates of the subs on here either,
Okay.
so
okay, sure,
just the year.
thank you, okay. So, can I assume that 2 and 3 are the original?
Well, no, 3 is the supplemental you see by the
Okay.
file number.
Okay,
And so what they did with number 3 is they replaced the original with the change in value.
okay,
And number 2 doesn't exist anymore.
right. So what we had for 1450 Mountain, there were 2 roll numbers. One was for 1450 and one was for Unit 5, 1450. There were two roll numbers. One of them was an exempt roll number. It was occupied by the City of Winnipeg Archives. The owner asked us to reverse it. He wanted everything under one roll number. So that roll number no longer exists. And there was a sup that was sent out last week that I guess they just received and appealed yesterday. So,
And it's docketed today.
yeah, well, that's why we would prefer to have 2 weeks to,
Yeah, I
at
would
least,
say,
to
yeah.
prepare evidence and whatnot for that, so.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
You missed the good part about it, is that the city created that role all on their own. No one told them to do it, and that's why the owner objected.
Well, that's typically how they deal with those leases, so.
Okay, let's move back to church.
Okay.
So we've agreed to permit the, yeah, we'll go to church.
Okay.
So no sermons from the mountain.
Don't know if you'd want a sermon from me.
Okay. Again, I'm just gonna go to that addendum,
Yeah.
just the last page 2, and I'm not gonna read it, I'm just going to, go over the gist of it, if I may. We previously had a 5% deduction for management expense. And for the 2020 rule, we've removed that expense as we found that most properties that are not owner occupied, we're recovering all management expenses from the tenants directly. So we still maintain a 2% expense amount for non-recoverable expenses. So I know this has been an ongoing contention, but we also supplied a table here to just give a few examples of how that, but market evidence for some time now has been showing that most management is recovered from tenants, so we felt that we no longer require that additional 5%. And, yeah, now I'll go back to my brief. I think I went over, my income workup and my comparables, and I just asked the board to confirm our value today, $2,669,000. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, questions, Mr. Newfield?
Yes, thank you. You inspected this property a few weeks
Yes.
ago?
I did, yeah.
And at the time of inspection, did you note some vacancy?
Yeah.
Which units were vacant?
Pardon me?
Do you know offhand which units were vacant?
There were a couple vacant, I know for sure. We didn't go in all of them.
Right.
Yes, but there were a couple vacant, but it's in the
Okay. On your page 5, I'm just gonna, I was just looking them over and comparing them to the rental, but premise ID 29397 was vacant, 12,000 feet.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other one, I'm not entirely sure, but it would be one of the units of 2,500 feet was also vacant. Or can you confirm, or you know?
I can't confirm that. I believe that someone was in the process of moving out. They could have already moved
Okay.
out.
And how long has it been, do you know how long it's been vacant?
I know that in 2018, there was 20% vacancy, and in 2017, there was 32% vacancy. Before that, for 2016, 15, 14, it was 100% occupied.
Okay. So, in the last 2 years, before the reference period, and to the current date, they're experiencing a larger than normal vacancy then. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. In your evaluation, you didn't make any change for that? Any adjustment?
No, I didn't. It was like market vacancy.
And what you provided here was this all done through the model on page 4?
Yes.
Did you examine their statements?
I did.
Because you've attached them to here, and I'm wondering what the purpose is of attaching them.
We're required to.
Okay. Well, if you're required to, you review them and help you check the accuracy of your model?
Sorry?
Do you use them to check the accuracy of your model?
The accuracy of our model. Well, we input their figures into our model.
Okay, and did you notice anything strange on this?
Yes.
Okay, same thing I saw, right?
Yeah, so there's it looks like there's a typo.
Right.
Like there's a 0 missing from the rent income.
Well, I would gonna suggest there's a 1 missing at the front.
Oh, even better.
Yeah, and no, I don't know if you did the same thing I did, but I know Maurice is probably right on his calculator now.
Okay.
There yet?
He's way ahead of you. That if you look at page 16 on the rent roll, that the actual statement is roughly 120,000 in income. You see that there's, the first unit is vacant, and the last unit is vacant. And I was just looking at last year's numbers as well, and I'm going to suggest that should be 117,949 rather than 17,949. But again, it wasn't corrected, but we did spot the same error. That's fine. In the case of the subject, did you calculate what their non-recoverables were?
I did. The non-recoverables are, I believe, 121,138.
That's how much they recover.
Right.
and they expend 135, 835, right?
Yes.
And the difference of 14,697, if you accept that the rent income is 117,000, is roughly 12.5%.
Yes.
Okay. In your capitalization analysis, that the city provides, just confirm for this board that there is no category for this type of property, all properties have the same category? You don't break it down?
Right, that's correct.
Okay, so any cap rate deemed industrial gets put into here, and you don't have breakdowns of different styles of property?
Correct.
Geez, I had another question here somewhere. No, I don't. No, that was it. Thanks.
Okay, now that Maurice has got his calculator warmed up, we're gonna let him ask some questions.
So you never examined, the mailer? Really?
Oh, yeah, right,
You did?
yeah.
So you took it into account? Your NOI is 186,813.
Well, I'm not saying that I adjusted our income workup because I examined the mail.
Yeah.
This is mass appraisal, so we use the market values.
Yeah, but I just wondered in the page 14 document, if you had reviewed the income and expenses to see if they were all appropriate, or if some of them shouldn't have been there. Really, that's what I'm after.
Right.
So I'm trying to see what 03252 means, which is the NOI.
3252 is
Oh,
incorrect.
103, well, the income is 239,087.
Okay.
And the expense is 135,835. I didn't add up that column, but it gives you a net of 103,252. And you're at 186,813. So I was trying to see if there's anything that that you could flag that shouldn't be there in the mailer. Really, that's all I'm after.
Okay.
Because quite often we're getting not the argument, but the point that the mailer sort of helps to justify whatever's in the presentation.
Right.
That's why I'm asking the
Okay.
question. So you can't comment on that?
Oh, sorry, I did. Okay, first of all, I'm gonna say that when I said there was a typo, I didn't realize there was a 1 missing. I thought there was maybe a 0 missing on the end, and that it was.
79, 490.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't go and add up the tenant leases. And so I mean, their NOI is definitely lower than our NOI. But on their income, they're not fully occupied. This is an income that, is only, where the building is only partially occupied.
Mhm.
So it's not at full potential.
Okay.
Whereas in our model,
Yeah.
we have rents on every unit.
And so the last 2 years, there was a high vacancy, as you mentioned, 20 and 38 respectively. 20% and 38% respectively is what you mentioned, I believe, the last 2 years?
20, check that. 20% and 32%.
Oh, 32, okay, I had wrong, that's wrong. So you decided to leave the model at 350? even with that information?
Yeah, we adjust to, our vacancy rate when there's chronic, ongoing vacancy, and so 2 years or 1 reference period, we don't consider chronic. We want to distribute the tax burden fairly and equally. That's why we apply the market vacancy instead of, if it were an ongoing issue, perhaps, or then definitely we would adjust the vacancy, but for 1 reference period, we're not. Before this, it had been
Full.
historically full,
So did you say it was full now as well?
No, I believe this 12,000 square foot unit is still vacant.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Brent?
So for multi-tenant B industrial buildings, is it, they all have the same vacancy rate? Except for ones with chronic vacancy?
No, depending on what neighborhood they are in. In this neighborhood, the vacancy happens to be 3.5. In, say, St. James, multi-tenanted building is actually lower, because St. James has a lot lower vacancy than this area.
Okay, that's my question.
Okay, I'm going to ask, because I anticipated coming up, the wall height, 16 feet, is a bit on the short side for the modern, was that taken into account anywhere in your calculation?
I think that the cap rate is a little bit higher, reflective of, and also my rent comparables, I chose comparables with very similar, wall heights. I think there's nothing higher than 18 feet.
Okay, yeah, I see it.
So that's just goes to show that, similar properties with similar wall heights can get these kind of rents.
Okay. And do you think that the possibility, I guess at April 1st of 2018, the Canada Way Industrial Park, whatever they call it, is on the horizon, but do you think that would be an impacting in the Inkster Industrial Park as yet?
Well, 3.5% vacancy. We haven't seen a lot, and we also have seen, maybe in that area, it could be affecting it. That's all I can say.
Because, I mean, recognize at that point in time it was merely a perspective.
Right.
Not much developed at that point in time. Okay, you can proceed, Mr. Newfield.
The income that we used was, we had the same information the assessor had. And we noted this typo, and I'm sorry I didn't get that clarified before the hearing, but in looking at the rent rolls, which are assessor's page 16, you can see that there are 2 units that are vacant as of the reference date. Unit 1681, and then the bottom unit, total space empty is 15,010 square feet, or 38% as of the mailer date. The chronic vacancy is the 32%, which is 12,510 square feet. And chronic meaning it was reported in the 2017 mailer, which I have a copy of, and 2018 it was vacant, and the inspection that was conducted noted it was still vacant, so that's 3 years, not 2 years. So it is an issue. 32%. We applied 15% because the concept of appraisal is that the minute you have a vacancy higher than 15%, the income approach is not the right method because the shortfall rates are so high that the income becomes virtually nothing. So we always cap it at 15% and then look at the results. Now in my calculation of the typo, I had come up with an actual NOI of 105,423. Because when I added the rent roll that was in place, I got a total of 120,120 rather than 117,949, and made the assumption that a 1 was slipped at the beginning on the income side. So when you calculate that through, our actual NOI from the statement that was provided to the city, albeit it's a correction of an error, comes about 105,423 with the vacancy, and we put in at 110,163. And the way we achieved that is we used rents from the lower end of the rental scale that's in the property, but we only applied a 15% vacancy, and then we used, of course, a 5% for non-recoverables. The the unit that is vacant was renting for approximately $50,000 per annum, which comes out to $4 a square foot exactly. So we went with 425. There are some rents that are higher, some that are lower, and the biggest one was at $4. That's how we came up with our valuation. Our cap was at this is kind of a default cap for us. If a property is operating normally, we're looking at about the 8.6% rate. I don't have an issue with the board looking at that cap rate and revising it, because we're dealing with a vacancy that's already been addressed by a higher vacancy rate and a shortfall that addresses the expenses, as well as a non-recoverable rate of 5% that would account for some of the risks that you would may consider in capitalization rate. And, you know, all this debate, and here I'll hand these out too so they're on the record. You've all seen this before. This is just our capitalization rate study. Interestingly enough, there's I found in my research that the Appraisal Institute actually considers that there's one time when you can not worry about non-recoverable rates, and that would be by a large adjustment to the cap rate on industrial single-tenant properties. Now, of course, we're not a single-tenant property, but because that theory is in place, that there is a marriage between the non-recoverables and that you use in the vacancies and the selection of capitalization rate. So you wouldn't go and have both. So I would suggest that a market vacancy on this would be slightly lower than 8.6%. We're going to leave that in because that's our number. We wouldn't go to 7% because that number doesn't exist. The handout I gave you, which was something that we've been putting in all of our future presentations, has the expense study, but more importantly, it's an interesting study. We have, the city quotes the Colliers cap rate. I showed the board how this cap rate was derived, and there's, we only deal with better quality properties. And for example, in our page, in what you were presented, marked 4B, we actually have our definitions of what we review in a cap rate. So when we became part of Colliers International, we finally got access to the computer records for our North American sales, and we've been working on providing some backup information. Now, these are generally all properties that fit the definition that we have, in case of multi-tenant, 25,000 to 100,000 square feet, steel frame, precast concrete, tilt-up, modern building, average lease duration 6 to 10, investment grade covenant strength, 15% market growth. Our subject, the closest we have to this is the square footage. We don't have investment grade tenants. We don't have 15% rent growth. It's been the same rent for all the years we've had it. But this chart kind of shows you what cap rates are across the country on quality product. As we research this more and more, you know that the BC rates aren't the greatest reliable because you have to find out if they sold for their land for redevelopment. So we're not putting much weight there at all. The Alberta rates are kind of interesting because they reflect the one industry province. So right now, oil is down and has been down for the past few years, which is going to impact rents lower, which is going to actually, the purchaser is going to be looking at an upside when the market rebounds, and that would depress the cap rate slightly because everybody knows Alberta's a cyclical economy, whereas everybody knows Manitoba is not. They're steady, slow growth generally. Ontario was impacted, well, the GTA has the same problems as the Lower Mainland. Quebec is almost entirely distribution-based sales that we have, and then we included some from the United States. And we're looking at some of the states that have similar economies to Manitoba, like North Dakota, Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, so-so. But I'm just trying to put this all in perspective. We have a lower grade industrial building with small units that's suffering from a vacancy problem. So we're definitely in the 8% league, and we're using actual income by an actual chronic vacancy. That's pretty much it. I know this is like looking for trouble here, but the previous assessment is under appeal. Our value on it was like you know what I'm like, I keep changing it. We ended up looking, and this is before the vacancy took effect, a value of $1,826,000, and that was a normalized vacancy, so before this occurred, because we knew it had happened, but we couldn't claim it because it was post-reference at that point. The assessment prior to that was $1,864,000, and we heard that the purchase price a few years before that was $1.8 million. So in normal performance, well, we're looking at a property that probably isn't going to perform better than 1.8 regardless of any market changes. It is what it is. The large vacancy that occurred before the reference date would suggest a lower value. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Okay, questions?
I just, your rent of $425, how did you decide that rent?
We went through the rent roll, and as I mentioned, we had some that were lower and some that were higher. The vacant space was out at $4. I haven't calculated the remaining space. It probably can get you a ballpark number, but the rent on this varied. Okay, so outside of the 12,510, there's 26,460 square feet of space that's tenanted, and the income coming off that is 117,000, which is $445 a square foot. So that's, we were just looking at a midpoint between the $445 on the small units and the $4 on the big unit.
Oh, so you didn't look at the rest of the rents in the building? Set 425 is on
Well, I was
the lowest rents.
I was just giving you the bulk one. It was like of the 6 or 7 units, I know some of them were higher than that, some of them were lower than 445, but the average was 445.
Okay. And your shortfall amount of $3.60, was that?
I don't know. Let me think. We generally don't look at the shortfall difference to what the assessment department has, or 375. I guess we never changed it from last
Okay.
year. We take 375 if you want to change it, but
Okay, well, I assumed
I have
it
to
was a
read-
typo, I wasn't sure.
then I have to recalculate it. I'm comfortable with the recalculation. We went through this, and I missed that when I was reviewing it, but I did look at the typo number and made sure that we weren't, like I said, my calculation was the actual NOI with the vacancy was 105, 423, and we're at 110, 163.
Okay. Thank you.
Those are your questions?
Yes.
Okay, questions, Brent?
This document that you submitted is the Collier's Management Expense Study.
Yes.
So you were talking cap rates when you were looking at the map.
Oh, yeah, well, there's a map at the back too. I didn't get into the expense study because it was just stapled to the back.
So this is cap rates, not expenses.
The last page is cap rates, the first couple of other pages are the expense study, we just stapled them together.
Okay, that was my question.
12:30 preparation.
It happens. No further questions.
Maurice?
Yeah, I have two questions. One was on vacancy. Are you saying there were 3 years vacancy prior to the reference date?
Yes, no, 2 years prior to the reference date,
2 years prior.
1 date post-reference.
Oh, one
year
post-reference,
post-reference,
okay.
yeah.
The other point is a statement you made, you talked about $1,826,000. Was that your request?
Yes.
At the last, and the second was 2254, which is under appeal.
Yes, that's
Is
correct.
that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to know what you meant by 1826. Okay, thank you very much. That's all I had.
Okay, on your management expense study, what was included in the management expense? Was it tenant inducements and leasing commissions?
It was every expense item that was non-financial. So, no interests, no amortization, no depreciation. And if we found a large construction expense, we didn't account for that either. We would include, and of course, no TI allowance was put in that because the TI allowance was from the other side of the line. So we were just looking at leasing commissions were definitely included, and landlord work was included, unless we found it was like we found a landlord work on a couple occasions that was several $100,000. We wouldn't apply it because that was likely a capital expense or something. We were looking, we pretty much capped those expenses based on the income that the property generated. Like in one case, we knew of a mall that required some repair, and the figure was, I think, $50,000. Well, we included that, but in the final analysis, you can see on our chart that the properties that had high expenses, there were some close to 35%, and those would be high turnover properties where the expenses are occurring. We didn't rely on that in our study, because on the bell curve, when it flattened out, it was 7% almost on the nose. So my final decision was, we're not going to deal with abnormal expenses. We're going to deal with a typical expense of 7, which is, in the past we've always said the 5% and the 2% for assessment purposes, which is consistent with appraisal purposes. And strange coincidence is 3-4 days ago we got a copy of one of our brokers' statements to one of our property owners, and he was explaining how much money you're gonna make from a lease. And he went through and said, well, here's your rent, and by the way, we take off 7% for non-recoverables on your net leases. So we're consistent, like the market is consistent with this practice. This isn't a windfall that we wanna take advantage of. We apply it as appraisers, brokerage applies it, property managers apply it. The owners who get their checks every month have it deducted from their income. So I think the assessment department has made an error in their review of this process. That we should be following proper appraisal procedures. And you know, just when I say that, they keep passing around this rebuttal information on the expenses. And there's a page at the end where they have a graph. And they've taken, what they've done is they've taken Altus's report and subtracted TIs and leasing commissions. Because they say apparently there's a board order that doesn't allow it. That's not true. The board orders they keep referring to are where somebody tried to double dip. They were already getting the management expense. They wanted additional expenses for these items taken off the rent. And not caring that the system had already made a standardized deduction for non-recoverables below. That's why those orders were created, to eliminate an opportunity of double dipping by someone on our side of the room who can't read a financial statement. We don't do that. They are a cost. And they are all encompassed in the 5 and 2%. 5% for non-recoverables, 2% for reserve allowance. It's that old joke, it's the same as downtown. We've all got to have those expenses. As an appraiser, if I did an appraisal without putting those in, I would be providing misleading information and subject to sanctions. If a broker failed to put those in on a prospectus for sale, he would face sanctions from the Securities Commission for not disclosing all of the information on expenses. You can't play that game, be misleading with people in our business, because we get sanctioned on it. And this has got nothing to do with property management. That's a totally different issue. It's a coincidence only in the name that the assessment department applies. I suggest striking out the word management and changing it to non-recoverables to reflect the reality of real estate business. The Sermon on the Mount.
Okay, thank you for that. So was it summation you wish to do?
No.
I think I just did it.
I think so. I said I wasn't giving a sermon, but you did.
I actually saw the Sermon on the Mountain a couple of months ago, and it's very unassuming. It's more like a small hill.
We're done, right?
We're done. Thank you very much.
Shut the cap off. We can talk about whatever.
Yes.